Okay, so we're back for another deep dive, and today we're going to be looking at something pretty fascinating. You know how after like every big election, there's this like avalanche of
Oh,
analysis,
yeah, definitely. Everyone wants to weigh in.
but like it's not always about who won or lost, right? Like
Uh,
there's all these like underlying signals and warnings that kind of get lost in the noise. And today we're going to try to like unpack some of that.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're going to look at this kind of like cautionary note that the Wall Street Journal's editorial board sent out to Donald Trump.
Interesting. So even after a win, they're still kind of like waving a yellow flag.
Yeah, exactly. Like they see some serious potential pitfalls ahead, and they're not shying away from pointing them out. And to get a different take on all this, we're also going to bring in a recent discussion from the Ring of Fire on YouTube. They're coming from like a totally different angle.
Oh, yeah, the Ring of Fire, definitely a more progressive viewpoint. So we're going to get that kind of left-right contrast.
Exactly. And the goal here is like to give you a really clear understanding of what the core arguments are from both sides. We're going to save you the time of having to sift through all this stuff yourself.
Sounds good. I'm ready to dive in.
Me too. Right, so let's start with the Wall Street Journal editorial. And even in acknowledging the win, it's not exactly like a full-blown celebration.
Yeah.
One of the first things they point out, which I thought was really interesting, is that half the country still dislikes Trump.
Right off the bat. Yeah, that kind of reframes the victory, doesn't it? It's not like this unified wave of support.
Exactly. It's more like this deeply divided landscape.
Yeah.
And the Wall Street Journal even calls the victory solid, but no landslide.
So they're acknowledging the win, but also making it clear that it wasn't like a total mandate.
Yeah, and that kind of sets the stage for everything else they talk about. Like they're basically saying, okay, you won, but don't think you have this like blank check to do whatever you want.
Makes sense. I mean, a narrow victory usually means you got to be more careful about how you wield your power.
Totally. And the Wall Street Journal really emphasizes that point. They even highlight how the GOP's majority in the House is like razor thin. Just a handful of dissenting votes could completely derail any legislative agenda.
Wow. So even within his own party, there's this potential for gridlock.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like this constant balancing act.
Yeah.
And this kind of leads into their warning about Trump exceeding his mandate from voters.
Which is interesting because didn't they kind of question if there even was a clear mandate earlier in the editorial?
Yeah, you're right. They did. It's almost like they're saying, look, you won, but let's not get carried away here.
It's a subtle but important point.
Yeah.
And then they go on to give some pretty specific examples of what they mean by exceeding the mandate. Things like midnight raids on busboys and separating mothers from children.
Yeah, like really stark imagery. They're basically saying that if Trump takes actions that are seen as overreach, there's going to be a huge backlash.
Definitely. Those are the kind of things that can alienate not just your opponents, but even some of your own supporters.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And then the editorial shifts to foreign policy. And this is where things get really interesting. They express a lot of concern about Trump's desire to court adversaries to get diplomatic deals done.
Interesting. Like he's willing to play nice with some pretty unsavory characters.
Exactly. And they specifically mention the ongoing war in Ukraine. They worry that he might strike an ugly deal that favors Russia.
Ooh, that's a pretty loaded comparison.
Yeah. They even go so far as to compare it to Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Oh, wow. So they're suggesting that this could be another situation where we end up looking weak or making concessions that hurt our long-term interests.
Yeah, that's definitely the vibe I'm getting.
Yeah.
And then they bring up China and Taiwan, and this is where things get like really tense. They point to this claim from John Bolton's memoir about Trump saying that defending Taiwan against a Chinese invasion was implausible.
Yikes. That's like a major shift in American foreign policy if that's actually his stance.
Right. And the Wall Street Journal lays out some pretty scary potential scenarios. Like, what if China responds to tariffs with a blockade of Taiwan? Or what if they seize nearby islands?
I mean, those are like real possibilities with huge global consequences. We're talking about a potential conflict between superpowers.
Exactly. And the question they pose is like, how would Trump actually respond in that situation? Would he be willing to risk a war? Or would he basically just cede Taiwan to China?
It really gets to the heart of America's credibility on the world stage. Like, are we going to stand by our allies or are we going to cut and run?
Exactly. It's a huge question mark. And then the editorial circles back to domestic politics. They predict that if Trump focuses more on like settling scores than on raising incomes for everyday Americans, the Democrats could sweep the 2026 midterms. And then potentially we could see a resurgence of progressive power in 2028.
So they're basically saying that if he doesn't deliver on the economy, he's going to pay the price at the ballot box.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. And they end their warning with a pretty blunt statement. A second presidential chance would be a terrible thing to waste.
Okay, so even from a generally conservative outlet, there's this clear sense of caution. Like they see the potential for things to go really wrong.
Totally. All right, so now let's switch gears and check out the Ring of Fire's take on all of this. And as you might expect, it's a pretty different perspective. They're way more skeptical about the whole idea that Trump even has a mandate after this win.
Oh, yeah, the Ring of Fire, they're not going to let that slide.
Yeah.
They're going to point out that he didn't win the popular vote and that a huge chunk of the country voted against him.
Exactly. And they're particularly critical of the idea that Trump has any real plans to actually raise incomes for working class Americans. They basically dismiss the whole notion of more tax cuts for the wealthy as a solution.
Yeah, that's a classic progressive argument. Like trickle-down economics doesn't work. Tax cuts for the rich just make the rich richer.
Exactly. And here's where things get really interesting. The Ring of Fire actually takes a much darker view of the very warnings that the Wall Street Journal is issuing. They claim that those negative actions like the midnight raids and family separations aren't just potential risks. They're actually already being planned.
Wow. So they're seeing this as like a deliberate strategy, not just like a potential slip-up.
Yeah, they're basically saying, this is who Trump is, this is what he does. And one area they focus on with a lot of concern is Trump's plan to overhaul AI policies. His supporters are framing it as like removing radical leftist roadblocks to innovation.
But the Ring of Fire has a very different interpretation.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
They're super worried about unchecked surveillance manipulation and corporate control.
Yeah, that's a whole different level of concern. Like AI is powerful stuff. And if it's not regulated properly, it could be used for some really bad things.
Totally. And they even bring up Elon Musk's involvement in these AI policy discussions.
Oh, yeah, Elon Musk. Definitely a controversial figure these days.
Yeah, and they suggest that his influence could like further blur the lines between truth opinion and straight up propaganda.
That's a scary thought. Like we're already struggling with misinformation as it is. And if powerful figures like Elon Musk are actively trying to manipulate things, it could get a lot worse.
Yeah, it's a really disturbing possibility. And then they do this quick plug for their sponsor, Ground News, which lets you see different sides of a news story.
Which is like super relevant to everything we've been talking about, right? Like it's so important to get multiple perspectives and not just get stuck in an echo chamber.
Absolutely. All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that both the Wall Street Journal and the Ring of Fire are sending out some serious warning signals about this second Trump administration.
Yeah, they're coming from different angles, but they both see the potential for things to go off the rails.
Exactly. And the big question is like, what's it going to be? Are we going to see more traditional policies? Or is it going to be a return to those like really divisive and potentially dangerous actions?
It's like a fork in the road. And we don't know which way things are going to go.
Yeah. And the wild card in all of this is public opinion. You know, a big chunk of the country is still opposed to Trump. So the question is like, how much power do they actually have to shape the next 4 years? It's definitely something to think about.
For sure.
Yeah.
We've got to stay engaged and keep holding our leaders accountable, no matter who's in charge.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. And as always, keep those critical thinking caps on.
And don't forget to check out Ground News for all those different perspectives.
Absolutely.
See you next time.
Take care.
Bye.